Welcome to the Making Ideas Work podcast. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Kate Leto. Kate is going to talk about herself in a minute, but very quickly, she's an executive coach for product leaders and public speaker and a published author of this brilliant book. This absolutely, genuinely fantastic. It's a really, really quick read, but a wonderful book from Sense and Respond Press called Hiring Product Managers. And the thing that really drew me to this book, and the reason that I wanted to have a conversation with you, Kate, was this is all about product EQ, right? And I really want to dig into product EQ, and I want to make sure that people listening kind of understand a little bit about product EQ. But before we go to product EQ and everything else that we're going to talk about on this podcast, I've stolen something from this book. So I'm going to use it right now with you, if it's okay.
Cool. Yeah,
and I'd
go
love
for
to
it.
start with a check-in.
Oh,
So
yay. I love check-ins.
I'd love to start with a check-in. So I'm going to steal this question from you, which is, right now, what has your attention?
What has my attention? Well, obviously you have my attention. But, also I was often with check-ins. The brilliance of check-ins is that it allows people to bring whatever they've just been doing into this new meeting, this new conversation, and just like put it out there. And by putting it out there, it kind of gets it out of your head a little bit, and then you can be focused, right? So that's kind of the underlying idea of the check-in. So what also has my attention is right before we started talking today, I was recording my own promos for a new course that I'm going to be offering and launching in the very near future, helping product leaders learn some foundational coaching techniques that they can bring into their own work. And so my head is on what I was trying to say and trying to get myself to say, even though it was in my head, but it wouldn't come out of my mouth. And then I looked ridiculous on it on the film. Anyway, so that is very much where my head is. So thank you for asking that check-in question. Now I get to ask you, what has your attention?
Oh, goodness. I did not think about you asking me the same thing back, but I love it. Thank you so much. Big thing for me is actually the thing that's been dominating so much of what I've done in the last few weeks and months even is really launching a brand new brand, a new business called Jointly. And we're at this point now where we're productizing a whole load of things that people do in the product and marketing world, coaching, consulting, and kind of productizing that to be able to accelerate people in a very short space of time using kind of a design sprint approach, 5 days. So that all that productizing has now got to the point where we can start to think about, right, who really can we start to go after? We've got our ideal customers, and we're really thinking about now really targeting some new clients. So super exciting kind of transition, and that's definitely been occupying a lot of my headspace and things that I've been thinking about recently. So thank you for asking. I'm going to put that aside for now.
Yeah. See, now we've said it. It's out there, and then we can focus, right?
I love it. It's such a good way to start a meeting, such a good way to start, I guess, a creative process as well, because you're kind of leaving some of that, things that you're might otherwise be preoccupied by, and kind of moving on to the fresh, to the new. And that's what transition, I guess, into what we're going to be focusing on now, and really trying to understand everything about your world. And this first question that I have is around product EQ.
Right.
It kind of makes sense to me, but I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that kind of go, well, what on earth is that?
Yeah.
I don't know what IQ is. I might have an idea what EQ is, but what's product EQ? Help us out.
Yeah, totally. So product EQ is all about focusing on the importance of emotional intelligence in product management. So EQ is an abbreviation for emotional quotient. And your emotional quotient is the measurement of your emotional intelligence. So probably about 6 years ago, I just completed my first coaching program, taking my first coaching program. And I remember sitting in January in my flat in London and thinking and doing a bunch of research, reading up on all sorts of product blogs that I hadn't been reading for a while, getting my dose of content, and realizing absolutely nothing was talking about the emotions, the human side of product management. We were so focused. All the blogs were so focused on our tools and our techniques, our roadmaps, our A/B testing, our OKRs. Even then, OKRs were like the talk of the town, and they still are today. And, my view is it's not that those aren't essential. They're so super important, but nobody was talking about the emotional side. And it just happened to that discovery kind of hit at the same time as my coaching training, where I was like really getting much more into human behavior, and emotion, and learning about emotional intelligence in a new kind of more academic way. And so I just kind of put it all together, and out came product EQ. And I started talking about things like, dealing with conflict at work. And I started talking about self-awareness quite a bit, and the importance of that in product management. And talking about the importance of like being aware of what's happening in your surroundings at work. So it kind of all came from that.
I love that, and it resonates so much with me because I think I've had this probably a similar kind of transition from thinking about the hard skills, the design, the prototyping, the using Figma or using certain software tools
Yeah.
or OKRs, jobs to be done, designs to be, all these things as the kind of hard skills, but actually where they become, I guess in my head, they're almost like the tools of the trade, if you like, as well, right? They're the things that enable you to be able to do things. But if you don't have that emotional, particularly with product, that emotional connection, that empathy, that adaptability, and some of those, and we'll perhaps dig into some of the kind of the human skills as well.
Yeah.
If you don't have those, then actually a lot of your job, either internally with, as you say, conflict resolution, or externally with things like really understanding human behaviors, what customers might do, users might do, all that stuff becomes really hard if you can't connect on a kind of a human level much more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a lot of it also is when you take these, our frameworks or our tools or techniques, and be it in product or design or research or engineering, it's all kind of a similar, they're different tools, but there's this idea of we have kind of our hard skills or our functional skills, and then, the soft skills that I refer to as human skills. And I think a
Which
lot
are
of it
not soft, right? Like, I think
they're
that's one of
so
the
that's
ironies,
why
right?
I don't call them soft skills. It drives me nuts. I mean, I get it, but I don't. Um, but it's often when you're trying to put these functional skills or technical skills to work that you find that there's kind of this gray area, right? Going from, okay, it says I just do these 5 things and then this will work, but hey, those 5 things don't account for the human elements. The fact that you're probably doing this in an organization with a lot of other people who are going to have different perspectives on it, going to have different reactions to things. And that's where that human skills aspect, I think, really comes to play.
As I see it, this world of product is actually a fairly kind of new discipline. A few years ago, we didn't really understand what the discipline of product was all about. It seems to be that the landscape is kind of changing with regards to new technologies and new tools, and they're coming on board all the time. Nothing seems to be kind of black or white. There's not a single way of doing things. There's many ways of doing things, and of course, this poses a huge number of challenges. So I guess that's where my head goes when I think of product as a practice. Partly it's because of it being new and kind of needing to adapt, being constantly changing your own practice. But what else does that mean to you? And I guess why? Yeah, what's that all about?
Why practice? Yeah, product is a practice. So in my mind, product management is kind of like it's something we don't have the ultimate answers to, right? We don't know. We're product people, design people, engineering people. We're given these really complex situations and problems to solve. And there's nothing to say that if you use this one tool or framework, it's going to solve it, right? There's a lot of trial and error that goes on. There's a lot of experimentation, and it takes a lot of practice. And sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't, but you just got to keep practicing. It's almost akin to, a medical practice or a legal practice, where there's kind of these guidelines, or there's this case history, or there's this medical legacy or history behind that can help people try new things or try different things to solve a problem. But for a doctor, everybody's different. Everybody's going to react to something differently. So there's not one true way. Doctors are practicing medicine. Lawyers are practicing law. I think product managers we're practicing what we do. We don't have a guaranteed outcome. It takes a lot of practice to figure it out. That's where
I
the
think it's
idea comes from.
Yeah, and the thing that it also makes me think of is, and without getting too much down this path, possibly, maybe we will. I'm quite happy to, by the way. But it kind of makes me think of like a yoga practice, of a mindful practice, of a thing which is not about reaching a goal, reaching that final destination. It's about the journey. It's about the constant evolution of yourself or your beliefs or whatever it is, but also the constant evolution of yeah, your skills, both emotional and human, and possibly technical as well. It's a constant evolving thing, right? And I love that idea of it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. In many ways with product, there's no right or wrong way exactly to do it, right? You got to play with it. You've got to practice. That's why I think the idea of experimentation and trial and error really works so well with product management, because, you know, we can give you these loose frameworks and tools and techniques, but I can't tell you 100% that that's going to work. And you've got to have then the resilience, to be able, and the human skills to be able to see it through when a lot of
Yeah,
times it doesn't work.
absolutely. And I guess, that idea of trial and error, we as product people are familiar with that approach, right? We're familiar often with experimentation as the the approach to learning more about customers, to learning what works, to learning what challenges people really are having, rather than making up some of the problems that we think they have. Rather, it's all about trial and error for further discovery. But where does that? I could easily see that this belief or mindset of trial and error and experimentation is something which is really difficult in organizations that don't kind of get that, or indeed in functions that don't get that as well. So thinking about it as like that's a practice that product people do, that's kind of one thing. But then how does, I can see this, and I'm a big believer that the product thinking or the product method, or thinking as a product person does, will benefit so many other areas of the business as well. And when you're talking about hiring, that must be quite a difficult thing, for particularly for training. Must be a difficult thing for people who are traditionally in the kind of HR world to kind of get their head around about the trial and error focus. So I'm interested to, I don't quite know what the question is there, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how is it important to kind of migrate from the product discipline, this idea of trial and error, and how does that cross other functions within an organization?
Oh, it creates a lot of trouble, challenge, I think. I mean, especially within organizations. I work with a lot of organizations that are going through a transformation of one thing or another, product transformation, digital transformation, whatever the transformation is at the time. But I'm working with a organization right now that is probably a couple of years into transformation, and trying to bring more product mindset into the way that they build products and they build their technology. And that is having, I mean, there's massive, I wouldn't say clashes, but there's tension that comes out of that from, the legacy way of doing things, which was very project oriented, right? Which was very, we're going to set out a timeline and we're going to set out, some goals and milestones, and we will hit these, and then we will deliver, X on Y date, and that's it. And then we'll move on, right? There was none of this. Let's do some discovery and figure out if this is even something that our customers want. That discovery may prove to be fruitless, and not be the direction we go in. Therefore, some might consider that time wasted. Well, product people in a product mindset will be like, okay, cool. So I'm closer to figuring out what I do need, versus what I don't need. That is a very hard thing for organizations to take on and to understand and to integrate in their ways of working. And with HR especially, I had a conversation with a client this week who's trying to hire people that have this product mindset, right? That have experience in trial and error and experimentation, and will bring that into their organization. And HR is just not, it's just something that they haven't hired for before. They don't know really what that means and why it would be important. And that there's a lot of tension because it doesn't align at all with kind of a typical hiring kind of criteria that they're accustomed to. So Yes, I
Yeah.
can't remember the question at this point, but yes, that happens all the time, and it is very, it's an ongoing conversation, and in itself, it's a the way my client and I kind of reframed this challenge he was having with HR and trying to have conversations around we're going to be looking for different kinds of people, different kinds of mindset, with different kinds of experience. The way we kind of reframed that challenge was that, wow, this is a really interesting opportunity that if you can help this HR person understand, why and how and where this will come to help the organization, you're kind of learning how you can convince probably 1,000 others in the organization, because you're going to understand what the hesitancy is. We're going to understand what the arguments might be to help persuade them or help them understand this change. So it's kind of like starting with a population of one and, and looking at the challenge that way and
Yeah.
learning what you can from that and applying that to the other conversations, because it's it's something that will impact hundreds if not thousands of people. So let's start with this one and see what we can learn from it and go from there.
I think that's such a good piece of advice itself. And I want to accentuate that and bring that to life even further, because I think you're right. When we start to think about transformation, organizational transformation, we often think about behavior change and mindset shifts, and as well as ways of working, changes in ways of working. But fundamentally, what we're talking about is kind of rewiring how people think, and therefore how people act, what they do, and how they interact as well. And just to do that on a personal level for one person is really hard, right? To do that across a whole organization with all of the baggage, all of the previously held beliefs that people have, or things you want to shift for people, is really, really hard. So I'd love that idea of, try it with one. And that's again, it's a product mindset part, right? It's about finding the, earliest customers that are going to love your thing, and build for that. Really identify what those challenges, those specific pain points or jobs to be done are for those people, and be able to build around it. And I think of your book, actually, when I was reading it, I was thinking about how meta it is. It's like a product book about hiring products, but it's clearly written by a product person, because it seems to be that you've just tapped into the empathy side of things, and you've kind of unpicked the specific challenges of, in this instance, I guess, the hiring world. And relating that to what you just said makes me think of how could you can apply that same product thinking to the hiring process,
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
rewrite the job descriptions, to rewrite how you select from a big group of people down to a smaller group of people. All of those different parts of the process of the chain could be designed differently with using kind of product tools and product mindset, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that is something that I was really trying to get across in the book, is that if we use some of our own approaches to hiring, it's going to change not only how you might hire that one person, but the impact that one person will have on the team, and that team can then have on the wider organization. One with one person, it's like the smallest unit of change, right? You got one person, but look at what kind of impact that person can have on a team and an organization. So my hope was to help people understand that with hiring, I know we often just want to get something in the door because we need help, right? We think getting this person in is going to solve that problem, and it doesn't. It
Mm,
doesn't. That's
mm.
not always the way it works. That if we take
And
it
actually,
more seriously, it can have a bigger impact.
yeah, 100%. And actually, as you go on to talk about again in the book, I'm coming back to it so often, because there's so many things. I've got the corners turned over. I've got
Ah,
it all written in, all kinds of things. But one of the things, again, that this makes me think about is building cultures. And one of the things I kind of hadn't been aware of,
I
I hadn't seen until you kind of painted this picture of it really vividly, which is that by hiring for the right kind of behaviors and mindsets and human skills that you want, what that might do is it kind of creates a conflict in the current environment, in the current
mm,
situation, where you might not have those behaviors, those skills, those mindsets. And we kind of, I guess, I've seen it but not understood it from that kind of angle that you painted there. What Bring that kind of challenge to life for me a little bit more, if you can. And with kind of what specific challenges does that kind of create within an organization when you start to hire with a forward thinking mindset, but
Right.
perhaps you don't have the other people that can support that?
Yeah, it's another tense situation that develops on all sides really, because you're right, the people that are going to be working with this new person are probably going to be in for a bit of, maybe a bit of shock and awe, certainly a bit of uncomfortableness um, around this person wanting to do new things. And so a lot of times there's defensiveness around, okay, well, this new person's coming in and saying we've been doing it all wrong, and what do they know? And they've not been here. They didn't make the decisions. They don't know the background. There's, a lot of that erupts quite organically. And then also on the new hire side, they're not often, or they're not always set up for success and coming into a culture. What I've seen quite often is that the hiring manager might paint a really rosy picture that might not be realistic, right? And saying
I've
like,
been
oh
there.
yeah, we're ready to do, we're going to work in trios, in product trios. We're going to have an engineering lead, a design lead, and a product lead making all the calls and making those decisions together. We're doing discovery. We're doing everything as we should be, and the product person steps into this new role and it's just not like that. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think it hits on so many different layers. It hits on the colleagues the colleagues this person's going to be working with, who may have been there for a while and have had a different kind of experience and are going through a different kind of change. It hits the manager, the hiring manager, who maybe didn't paint the most honest picture, and then has to deal with the repercussions of that. It also hits the person that's coming in, obviously, the new hire, who expected something and it's not quite the way it doesn't meet those expectations. So when this happens, and it often does, ideally we'll get to work with, we'll get to start with the hiring manager before interviewing begins, right? And we'll get to have conversations around what kind of person are you looking for? And looking at those human skills. Often those human skills aligning with product skills may not be that you're ready for that completely progressive product leader or product manager that is ready to take the world by storm with all these great frameworks and techniques that we talk about, but somebody that can help bring everybody else, other members of a team along, right? And have a little, perhaps, I don't know if it's patience or if it's confidence in knowing that it'll come, but somebody that, if you look at a spectrum of 1 to 10, and 1 being like, this is where the legacy organization is now, and 10 being where they maybe want to be in a couple of years' time, maybe you want to bring in somebody who's halfway into that journey, right? Who gets where the vision of where you want to go, but is comfortable saying like, all right, we're here, right?
Yeah.
And together I can help work with folks that have been here for a little bit and can help us move ahead. So it's reframing that criteria of what you're looking for before you start interviewing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, and I love the fact that you're, talking about coming in at that early stage rather than when it really hits hard and someone's there and they're frustrated and the team around them think that, they're a know-it-all and they're trying to change the way that everyone works. And rather than coming in at that point, which is like highly toxic maybe, and definitely heated, actually coming in that earlier stage. And it's making me think of things like, the importance of the onboarding process for new hires, and also the onboarding process for new hires, but also, I don't know whether people think about that kind of almost the onboarding process of the people that exist there within the organization as well, to accommodate and to understand where that new hire is kind of coming from, so that they have an openness and a willingness to kind of go on a journey as well, understanding that there's a bigger strategy or vision to get to more of a product-led organization, and being able to kind of adapt themselves. And I guess that leads us to a little bit about, I'd love to kind of almost geek out a little bit and dig into this human skills element, the specific maybe human skills. There's quite a list here. Which are the, I don't know, I was going to ask which are the most important, but they're all so important, right? Which ones kind of jump out, or which ones you kind of think about when at first when you think about human skills that are so important for product teams, but maybe more widely across organizations as well?
I think for I think for everyone, and I always answer for, I guess, product in particular because that's who I work with quite a bit. But self-awareness. Self-awareness is like the foundational, like meta skill, I think, for pretty much anyone. The seeing that I talk to product managers and product leaders a lot, I kind of focus in on them. But, product or self-awareness, when I talk about it, I don't think about it just as maybe like the more typical definition of like getting to know yourself really well, getting to understand why you do things, why you don't do things, blah, blah, blah. But it's also about how others see you, right? And how you fit into that world around you. And I don't think we realize that as much. We don't think about it that way, to be a self-aware
Mm,
person. And a lot of times it's just like, I wonder why I did that. Or, what if I tried,
yeah.
it's kind of a study of self, but I don't think we need to realize that it's also being aware of yourself and other worlds, right? In the world around you. Um,
Right. So
so
in order to, if I've got this right, in order to really fully understand yourself, you almost need to know people's other people's perceptions of that self, I guess,
right.
so that you can. It's almost like that 360 view, if you
Yeah.
like. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think that's where it's so important to have, at a tactical level, you got to have 360 reviews or feedback in some way. Like I just did that for I worked with a colleague who did a 360 review of me, and talked to a bunch of my peers and talked to clients because I hadn't gotten structured feedback. I've been an independent consultant and advisor and coach and stuff for 11, 12 years now. So I haven't had that kind of feedback in that long. So I just had that done. And it was such like, it was hard at times, but it was such a good experience. I'm so glad I did that because now I have a better understanding of like, I always felt maybe there were a few things that weren't quite right in how I was dealing with things or what I wanted to get out of things. And the feedback that I got just helped fill in a lot of gaps,
Mm.
to help me get a more kind of a holistic look, I guess, of like how others are seeing me and how my presence is actually interacting or being kind of perceived by the rest of the world, which is hugely important.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. Wow. I, there's loads I want to dig into here, by the way.
yeah,
Firstly, when you talked about, you know, that process, I could feel myself clamming up because I'm like, I'm fearful of that myself. And I
yeah,
consider myself to be very open. I am good at, I think on the whole, I'm good at receiving feedback. I probably don't ask for feedback enough.
yeah,
But if I'm someone who thinks of myself as, ahead of the curve, maybe, or whatever else, maybe I'm doing myself an inflation of justice there. But other people must be super fearful of those kinds of things, right? And yourself as well. You're someone who advises people to do this. You probably coach people through these processes yourself,
right.
but to know that it was difficult for you to kind of go through that process as well, kind of makes me feel reassured. I think
Yeah.
that that we're all in this same boat.
Oh,
Everything is
yeah.
scary.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all scared about what others think of us, unless you get it. There's all the nice things, which is great, but there's always going to be those things that's like, oh, yeah, I do that, don't I? Or like, maybe I should try that different next time. Or, um, so yeah, I was excited to do it at first. And then as we got closer to actually starting it off, we called it Project Kate because we didn't know what else to call it. As we
Love it.
started, we got ready to kick it off. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I really need to do this. Everything seems to be going great, with work. So maybe not. And I'm very happy that my colleague gave me a nudge on it. And we went ahead and did it. And yeah, I mean, the really cool thing I think as well is it's in a way brought me closer to the people that gave me the feedback. I don't know exactly who said what. It was anonymized. But
Right.
I think in some ways they were, um, impressed that I asked for it, asked for the feedback in this way, and went through this process. And I was really I was really impressed that they took note of things of me that I didn't think people would take note of, that,
Mm,
and some good and some areas for me to improve. But it does make you realize, back to that whole topic of self-awareness, of like, I didn't know that people knew I did this or didn't do this,
right.
from a human
Yeah.
behavior perspective. Like, I didn't know they were paying attention to that. So, um, and
That's so cool. It's such a
yeah,
good thing to do.
so I highly
Yeah.
recommend it for everyone, even us
You know what?
folks who have our own businesses. You got to do it.
I'm gonna do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a micro agency. It's just myself and one and a half other guy, people. But yeah, absolutely. And it kind of makes me think of whether or not you could do this, how broadly you could do this. Can you get into relationships with clients where you could ask them for feedback, not on how the project went, but generally kind of how you're how you're doing as well. I think that would be a great thing to do as
Yeah.
well. Is that something you would recommend?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we did. So we talked to five or six peers, and then five or six clients. And then for me, it was a mixture of corporate clients, of corporate sponsors, um, and also just one-on-one clients that I had. It wasn't anyone that I'm working with right now, but it's people that I've worked
Mm,
with not too long ago. Um, so yeah. And it was
yeah,
great because the experiences of working together were close enough that, there was plenty of feedback, positive and growth oriented, to like that they could tap into and share. So no, yeah, I think it's important to have the balance of both.
got it. Amazing. I love that. And just to come back to the first question there, which is all about self awareness and this key thing that underpins this human skill that underpins so much more. Once you have that real depth of self awareness, both your own beliefs, understanding maybe your beliefs, understanding how you react, where your energy levels are maybe throughout different projects and where you are through the day, but also understand the 360 view of how people view yourself as well. I think that fundamental means that you're able to build on some of those areas of areas of development that you could kind of focus on as well, which is I love that first really understand yourself, like get that awareness, and then look for the opportunities to either um, build on those strengths even more. And I think that's a really important part of it, as well as of course working on some of those areas of improvement as well.
Yeah. 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 There's a book by another executive coach named Marshall Goldsmith, and it's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And I love the name. Like, God, I wish I would have written a book with that title, because that's just like brilliant. Because it's so true. But he talks a lot about 360 feedback as important to building self-awareness. And I do offer 360 feedback assessments with my clients as well, because I think it's really important from a coaching perspective that we're not just focused on kind of what my client is saying, but have that more complete picture of what, of how they're being considered within their environment, right? Within their
Right.
community, whatever it might be. But
Yeah.
anyway, Goldsmith says that we often don't accept the negative feedback that we're given, because it doesn't align with our worldview of ourselves, right? So it doesn't align with our self-aware of what we consider as part of as who we are. Um, so that one of the hardest parts and getting this kind of feedback and finding out your blind spots, or whatever we want to call them, is actually accepting it as true. Um, and I would say I definitely had that when I first saw some of the feedback. I'm like, they don't know. They had no idea what they're talking about. And then I let it kind of sit. I didn't have a follow up with my colleague who did the interviews for about a week and a half or so, because I just kind of we let it kind of digest and marinate. And I'm like, yeah, I could see where it's coming from. I can see what that. And the cool thing is I got excited about it, because I'm like, I'm like, wow, so if I can work on this, and this can help me get to that point that I want to get to, perhaps, and I can make the most out of that. So I think there is something to be said that once you get it, once you get feedback in whatever form, the knee-jerk reaction, the default reaction is no, they don't know what they're talking about. It's kind of putting up a
Mm,
defense
yeah.
mechanism, and finding a way to just get at peace with it, because there's a kernel of truth in that that can
Yeah.
really help. That can help you, right? That's what it's there to do. It's not there to hurt. It's there to help. So that was my biggest challenge, is getting through that. And once I did, I'm like, this is actually quite cool. I could use this is like a superpower now. I know all about this. I get it,
I
and
love
I can build on that.
Yeah, I love that, and again, it makes me think of so much about mindful practice again, and that sitting with the challenging, sitting with the or even kind of creative discomfort as well. So in order to create the best thing, sometimes you need to sit with this thing that you're grappling with over a period of time. Even more, it's probably even more pronounced when you're hearing feedback that initially throws up the defensive mechanism, that inbuilt kind of immediate flight or fight response, I guess, that kind of is
Yeah,
there to protect ourselves. And actually just sitting into that, letting it letting it permeate a little bit, and then becoming, I guess, yeah, that acceptance in order to be able to build on build on things further. You've got to be able to get that real deep acceptance. And it may well be, of course, that you can disagree with something once you've reflected. You can say, actually, well, that maybe that's come from a different direction, but actually now that you know it, and that's the perception that somebody else has of you, it's a feeling that they have which is irrefutable. Then you can decide whether you want to work on that thing, or whether it's actually something which is just a part of you which you're willing to embrace, or whatever else. So that first part has to be key, of acceptance, right? Super
right.
interesting.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What other one of the things I think I'm always interested in trying to understand, and want people that might watch or listen to this to go away with, is maybe other uh, tools, again, practices or approaches that they could take in order to continue to work and develop some of those human skills. Is there anything that maybe you're doing in your coaching practice yourself that enables people to help with, I don't know, some of the human skills, or more generically around the kind of product EQ world? Is there anything that you can bring to life for us here?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing that I encourage people to do is journal and write things down. Like I've got four notebooks around me right now. So I might overdose on this a bit, but there's a lot of research into the fact that writing your thoughts down has has just almost kind of a magical impact, because it's making your brain slow down, and to think about what's happened. If it's good or bad, happy or sad, even if you're just making a list of things to do, it's making your brain slow down and, go from here to here onto a piece of paper. It's a different experience, and it's a different thought process. So,
Mm,
even with coaching clients now, I'm encouraging them to either buy a journal at the beginning of our engagement, or if they're close to me, I'll send them one because I think it's that important to have, to be able to, in our sessions, you can, there's often people write down something to think about, something they want to work on later, something that's come to mind, and then in between sessions they can kind of keep track of how they're feeling, or what's going well, or what's bugging them, and then we can bring that back in. So it's not only kind of like a tracking of what's happening in life, but it's processing it in a different way. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, write things down, write it down. I say that quite a
yeah.
bit.
And it makes me think there's a couple of things there that it straight away reminded me of, which are, firstly, like, our brains are amazing at processing information, but it's not very good at storing it. So if there are, like, sometimes we just need to get it out. We need to get it out onto
Yeah,
paper. We need to kind of free up that cognitive space, if you like, and put it somewhere else. Thinking almost like hard drives. It's not like that, I know, but just like offloading it, getting it somewhere, getting it secure, getting it safe, and then we
right.
can move on. But there's the other thing, and I think it's Kevin Kelly who talks about this. Well, or at least I remember him talking about it. And he's the former editor of Wired. I think he started Wired magazine. I think he wrote a book about these kinds of things, but he talks about the fact that he doesn't really know what he's thinking until he writes. Like he's a
Yeah.
writer, so that's what he does. He can process and understand his thoughts much more when he kind of writes. And I think the same around lots of different things. But basically, doing anything means that you're able to understand what you're thinking much more. Think about it in terms of prototyping, for example, as well. I do a
Yeah.
lot of, particularly working at a very early stage of product development and product design, is just get that scribble of of
Hmm.
wireframe or whatever. Just try and get it out there, out of your head, so you can start to make sense of what you're thinking of. And it might be something that you throw away, but that's fine. And
Yeah.
so I think the importance of getting it out, but also it enables deeper reflection and thought as well. And then the other thing, the challenge that I've had with it, and this is from a personal perspective of trying to journal just in my kind of everyday life. And I make a lot of notes, but I wouldn't say I'm a journaler, if you like. One of the challenges that I've had is thinking of it um, as a process to remember things better. So I haven't really thought about it as a way to just free writing. And it was only today actually that I spoke to a colleague of mine about this, and he mentioned I think it's called the creative method. So he's
Yes.
doing something every day. He's writing a page or a couple of pages or whatever
Yeah.
of just free writing. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yep.
It's not important. It's just about getting it out. And I
Yeah.
really like it's kind of interesting that I've heard that, and now you're talking about journaling, which is definitely a signal for me to get better at journaling. I think and start working on that practice.
Yeah. I think I've heard of something similar to what your friend's doing called morning pages. First thing in the
Right, right,
morning
right.
before you get
Yeah,
going, just send write a page or two or whatever, for a certain amount of time, whatever it is. Which I think is a great method as well. Um, yeah, I remember when I was working my last full-time gig, which was quite some time ago. But when I would get really frustrated with something or someone, I would take my sticky note and my pen and I would just write down something about it on my sticky note. Like for example, if I'd had like a tense moment with the CTO about something that we were going to do, I just write CTO down and rip it off, put it down, and then like, all right, I'll come back to that later, right? But it just felt good to get it out of my head, to maybe make that dramatic movement of tearing it off the sticky note, the post-it note, and slam it up, or not slam it, but put it down on my desk and be like, I'm coming back to that, right? I'm moving on for
got
now.
it.
But it was just, it was this like um, momentary effort or action of just like getting it from here to here. This is what's frustrating me right now. And I'm gonna, and I'm gonna put it down. But I know I can come back to that. And I remember, I mean, often at the end of the day, if that sticky had been sitting there most of the day, I'd gotten over it, or we'd moved on, or there'd been some resolution, and I could just kind of, and back in the bin. But
Right.
it helped in the moment,
Yeah.
definitely.
And if you hadn't done anything, there's a chance that could have just festered
Oh, just
in a
builds,
way
right?
and build and build and build, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I love that it's almost like a parking lot, right? You kind of
Yeah,
put it aside. Maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we won't because we've actually answered it or we've solved it or we've
yeah,
figured out something in a different way, thought about it a different way or whatever it is. I love that. Yeah. And again, it's kind of strange. Maybe it is strange, maybe it's not. But what again it's making me think of is again some kind of mindful practice where you think of something, you need to kind of capture it and just let it float,
yep.
capture it and move it on, and
It's a
that kind
thought.
of
It's gonna
reflection
come
and
and go, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Just let it,
yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
be like water.
Yes, exactly. In and out.
Yeah,
At
amazing.
ease.
Yeah, exactly. And that's oh goodness, wouldn't that be amazing if we can start to make organizations and teams be more at peace with each other and themselves? That'd be quite amazing.
Yeah.
um One of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and just to kind of switch gear slightly, is to talk a little bit about culture, if that's okay. Because one of the things that struck me within the book, and it's something that I think about an awful lot, particularly at the moment, is the challenge of building cultures. And we hear kind of this conflicting viewpoint quite often about culture fit,
Mm.
and whether or not that's I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts on on cultural fit, because
Sure.
it's not as simple as it sounds. It's not as simple as,
No.
you've got you know, a shape of someone that you're looking to kind of put in here. It's especially difficult when you have kind of a, let's say, a lived culture
Sure.
versus an intended culture, is, you know, when you're
Sure.
trying to shift and transform into something different. But what is, firstly, what's kind of that culture fit? Is that a good phrase now? Is that something we should be trying to get? Is it, and also,
Yeah.
does, is culture something that can be designed? Is it something that can be shifted, or is it something that just exists? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, all really good questions. So in the book, I talk about culture fit as something that we need to be aware of and we need to be watchful of, because when we're hiring for culture fit, that means we're hiring somebody that's just like us, most likely, right? So that means we're not giving space for people that might come from a different background, have different experiences, might think a different way, might have gone to a different school, you know, whatever it is. So it does mean we're just kind of replicating. It's more of the
Mm,
same. So if you want more of the same, that's what you'll get with culture fit. I'd say 9 times out of 10. So instead of focusing on and just hiring for culture fit, um, the idea is to look at something like, think about something like a culture ad. What does your culture have, not have, right? What are you missing? You know, how could you boil those skills down? And it's really interesting because when we think about hiring for a product team, a cross functional team of any sort, we often do think about, well, I need somebody, I don't have somebody that has these X skills, these X functional skills or technical skills. And we'll easily write a job description or a copy and paste one from somebody else that will look for those, right? But we don't take that into our nice to haves, which are often where the human skills come to play, right? We don't think about like, okay, I want somebody who's actually going to challenge our thinking, who's going to present a different kind of perspective, who's going to come
mm,
from maybe a different kind of a different kind of background, or a different kind of community. Even, you know, we don't think about that, and that's where the idea, don't go for culture fit, go for culture add, go for stuff,
mm,
maybe think about what you need to add to your culture in order to make the changes that you're looking for, right? That you're wanting on a meta scale. Um, so that's the
yeah.
idea. And it's hard to get. I mean, I especially get that because I understand and I hired many times for cultural fit. Oh, no, they wouldn't fit in here. You know, the way they communicate or the way they think, the ideas they're bringing up, they just wouldn't fit in. So we don't want that because that'll create more distress, right?
Mm,
Create blockers. But that's not the idea. We need to shift that thinking to realize that by having different ways of thinking on a team, by having different experiences, that's going to help us so much more with our innovation, with our willingness to try things a different way. So it's a big shift in mindset to go from culture fit to culture add.
it is, but it makes so much sense to me because, but uh, one of the challenges, as you kind of talked about here, is it's easy to say, well, I need someone that can, you know, write really great OKRs and can manage that thing, and, you know, or I need people that are much earlier in the chain to kind of do very early stage prototyping, and but we don't necessarily. And I think because of the human skills, as I look at the list again, many of these I feel like I should have and want to be able to say I would rate highly on those. And so but it's very difficult to assess. I think it's very difficult to
Yes.
know, you know, what really is my influence power, what is my empathy kind of skill really look like. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to, and it's also really difficult to say what it's like, what, how good it is, but also what instances have I used those skills? What examples of using those kind of human skills can I bring? Whereas
Yeah.
I can say, well, I built this prototype, I kind of designed this thing, I
Yeah.
ran OKR sessions, whatever else.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to kind of assess and be able to, I guess, again, be aware of the organizational makeup with regards to the human skills that people have, and therefore where the gaps are, where all the ads of culture might be needed within an
Yeah.
organization. So that's definitely one of the challenges. Is there anything that you've done or thought about that can help with that?
Yeah. I mean, it is a challenge, definitely. I think especially because we're not the structure hasn't been there for us to think about human skills in the same way that, or even at the same time that we think about our functional skills, right? It is very easy to tick the box of like, need somebody good with OKRs and need somebody who can, run a design sprint, has good experience with that. But we don't have the structures in place yet to say like, I need somebody with lots of empathy, right? Because our team's gone through a lot of crap recently.
Mm.
Or even the customers that we're targeting have had lots of challenges. I need somebody who's going to be able to relate to that, and it's just an area that we're not as comfortable talking about. That's why, even when I started talking about product EQ a few years back, I was very hesitant to do it because I thought no one would take me seriously, right? So if you look back at my very first blog articles about like self-awareness and conflict resolution, I packed them full of statistics and financial statistics. It said like companies that do this and focus on self-awareness have like a greater rate of return, and, to show that there's really financial value in this. So I think we've come a long way as a community and even as a society to realize these human skills are really important. But I don't know if they've really made it into our consciousness and ways of working when it comes to thinking like, okay, I'm going to hire somebody and I really need them to not just be good at dealing with ambiguity, as all job descriptions say, but really to break that down. Like, what does that mean? What do they need? Do they need to be super self-aware? What does self-awareness mean? Maybe I should actually create like a deck of cards that has definitions of all these human skills and make sure people use them in their putting together job. I don't know, but it's like
Yes.
we need something that helps people make this more normal, right? And
Yeah.
gives them the support to realize that these decisions on who we're bringing into our organizations when it comes to hiring, or we're building teams, or we're creating cultures even, what do we really, what do we need to bring in that we haven't been able to really define, and
Mm.
how can we,
Mm.
we also have a huge tendency to want to measure everything, right? And I get
Eh,
that,
yeah.
because measurement
Yeah.
leads to like returns, right? Like I could show impact. Um,
Yes. You can see
yeah,
progress. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And there are ways you can measure these human skills. There's so many tests and things like that out there. But I do think a lot of that comes from having, I talk about in the book, certain types of interviewing questions, behavioral based interviewing questions to have people tell you a story about an experience where maybe they showed empathy or they weren't self aware. And, to understand, to see how they react to that line of question, coming up in an interview. The story doesn't have to be perfect because you're probably catching them off a little bit with something like that, but see how they respond. I think that would be a really interesting experiment. So you can measure that stuff if you want to. I don't
Mm.
know if that's necessary. And sometimes I think we over skew on wanting to focus on that.
It might be that you kind of you have a low score for certain things, but the low score doesn't necessarily mean that you have to develop those things. It means that, I guess, the important part of, as I talk this through, the important part of that with regards to a team is that you recognize that about yourself, and therefore you can see what the team looks like and be able to kind of
Yeah,
identify any bigger weaknesses across the organization. So maybe
yeah, yeah, yeah.
maybe reading too much into the quant side of things can be problematic, perhaps. But definitely when you kind of aggregate it across a team, then it feels like it would be something that might be fairly valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I've also worked with organizations to develop career frameworks or career ladders
Mm. Yeah.
within organizations that include, all of our technical skills, for products. So it could be comfort with data, it could be um, measurement, it could be all, whatever it might be, presentation skills, whatever it might be. But then we also have these human skills involved, that are sitting right alongside them. So working in organizations like that, that puts them side by side and talking about, if you're at this level, we expect you to be able to do this and to have some self-awareness, and to be able to display it like this. And if you're at this level, we expect you to be able, to have these different, resilience and maybe
Yeah.
executive presence. And what does that mean? So there are organizations that I think get it and are bringing it into their ways of working, and ways of thinking about promoting and building teams and organizations. There need to be more, and
Yeah. Always.
yeah,
One of the things that you talked about there, particularly, you spoke about it in terms of the hiring process and the interview kind of questions that you have about storytelling. Now, one of the things that I was really interested about the way that you wrote the book is that it has this storytelling arc. It has this narrative, and it kind of made me think. You don't see that very often in business kind of books. I was
yeah,
interested why you chose to write in that kind of way, and I guess whether yeah, and I guess more of a general question around storytelling and its importance, perhaps.
yeah. I, uh, you know, I wrote that book so many times over, as you can imagine. And the storytelling was just the easiest way for me to to bring to life the things that I want to talk about. I wrote a few versions of that book from more of kind of a factual academic perspective, without the story arc, and it just felt really dry and it didn't really
Mm,
hang together. And I'm like, this isn't interesting. I didn't think it was interesting. My publishers didn't think it was interesting. So I just started writing like I was telling a story, you know, um, because the experiences that I was talking about, all were real. They're my experiences over years working with different clients. And I just kind of brought it. I'm like, this is great. It gives me a chance to bring all of this stuff together into one storyline. Um, and it just worked well for me, to tell it,
yeah.
to bring that information together as a story. And the importance of storytelling, absolutely. I mean, stories bring people together. They create a common vision. They create a common, almost kind of good and evil, right? And in a
Mm,
way, and I think stories can help people understand their place in the tale. You know, so I'm hopeful that in the story that I told, it makes it easier for people to be like, oh yeah, I'm that person, right? I'm the Pete. I got
yeah.
hired and I'm not doing my job very well and I'm in trouble and it's because I got hired for the wrong reasons, right? Because nobody talked to my team. But so it would just make it easier for people to identify themselves um in what I was trying to get across. And I think stories help people in organizations do that in all ways. And many, it brings your role into whatever the story is in a much easier way, much more relatable way.
100%, and exactly what happened with me. I was interested to hear your reason, because that's exactly what happened. I transported myself, teleported myself into that world of Pete, and and I think particularly with Sense and Respond Press, with Jeff and Josh's books, and other people that write, these are small, but very crammed, full, and
Yes.
it's hard to write a book. It's probably even harder to write a short book that covers so much ground, right? So I think the choice of the narrative for this book, for me, it just meant that you were able to cut through so much of that scene setting and other context that you would have had to have done in a more in a longer form kind of way, because you're able to transport people very quickly to that context and that situation, and then kind of move on to exactly what was facing Pete or whatever else in at that
Yeah.
time. So it feels like it was a much quicker way to get the value. And I think of your product mind, like looking at a book, and I think this is why I love the Sense of Response stuff so much, is because it's product people that think about what do people want when they're reading. They want to get the outcomes they want to get to. They want to get that understanding without the long process and going over the same thing over and over again with 25 different case studies and whatever. You want to get the impact immediately. And it's also something that means that I've reread it, and I don't often reread business books at all, right?
Yeah.
So to have read it once, to have read it again, and then to keep on flicking through, it means it's just so much easier to really get a full grasp of that. So I think credit to you and that
Thank you.
process. This is the other thing I was going to say as well, is that what you did was you experimented with different forms, experimented with different ways of doing it. You weren't wedded to any of those and going, well, it's done, it's got to be like this, I can't, reworking it and kind of applying a different structure and a different kind of like format, I think totally worked. And again, great job. Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That means a lot.
Oh no, honestly, it's a brilliant read, so thank you. I'm gonna switch kind of focus a little bit, because we didn't really do, I normally do an intro, get people to introduce themselves and kind of talk about their history and things. We didn't really do that. We flew into the kind of check-in, and then things just evolved from there. But what I'd love to ask you about is, you're a product coach and an executive
Yeah.
product coach, and I know that you've now got a course which we will link down to into the description as well, make sure people can know about what this is all about. But that course is all about kind of a coaching techniques, coaching principles, and coaching practice. I'm interested, firstly, though, to hear about your transition and the difference, if you like, between consulting and coaching.
Right.
That might be too much for a couple of minutes that we've got at the end of this. We might have to have a part two, but any
Yeah.
kind of initial thoughts about that would be great.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's a really good topic. So, um, I was a consultant. I've been, as I mentioned, an independent consultant for quite some time. I left my last full-time job. I was head of product at move.com for a few years, and left in 2011. And I left to go do my own thing. I was going to start a startup because that's what everybody in London was doing at the time. And while I was figuring that out, I started doing consulting. I was working with VC firms, helping their portfolio companies figure out how to build a product, how to hire product people, how to kind of get that product mindset from the get-go. And I really liked it. So I kind of just kept doing consulting, and working for startups turned into working for big organizations who wanted to learn how to build things like startups do, like how are they doing that, which of course meant they all had to transform in one way or another. So I was kind of going through that ride for a few years, and it was 2016, 2017. I think my first coaching gig for product person was in 2015. And at that time, it was really all around helping a new head of product kind of get her feet around her, and really focus on more of these technical skills that we talk about, right? But I realized that my clients of all shapes and sizes we were starting out on some kind of product question, like strategy or, roadmaps or, measurement or OKRs or whatever it was. But then like 5 minutes in, it became quite personal, right? The questions shifted to things like, how do I get my team to actually become more engaged? Why won't people listen to me? Why doesn't my boss respond to me? I can't get a promotion. I don't even know if I want to be doing this with my life, Kate. And I'm like, I'm a consultant. I'm not, So I went and took a coaching course, and not to become a coach at the time, but just to like get some of these skills to bring them into my work. And that was back in 2017. And I kept working as a consultant. And in my mind, there is a huge difference between consulting and coaching. And I try to respect this difference. But in my mind, consulting is, I'm hired for my expertise and my background. And I'm going to help you solve a problem. And I'm going to tell you how I think I should do it. And I might even be the one to do it, to solve it for you. That's part of my consulting package. Coaching package is, I'm going to help you figure out what's going on, because the answer needs to come from you and not me, because you're way more likely to make whatever change needs to be made if you come up with the idea versus me sitting here telling you what to do. So in many ways with coaching, you might have heard the term holding space and asking really powerful questions to help our clients like figure out what is the actual challenge they're having? how would they really want to handle that? How does that kind of, where does that sit with them on a personal level? So a lot of the leadership development coaching that I do, I'm not there to help them solve, I'm not there to solve their problem for them. I'm there to help them figure it out for themselves. It's a big shift in mindset and
Yeah.
expectations on both sides.
And thank you. From a personal perspective, thank you for that beautiful articulation of those differences, because I've been similarly, I guess, I've been an independent consultant for many years, but I think that my practice now is more akin to the coaching than it is a consultant.
Yeah.
However, my organization is, we talk about it as a consultancy, but the practice is far more aligned to coaching. So that's something that I think I need to sit on, reflect on a little bit, hold that space for myself perhaps, and get other people to help me around with that. But yeah, to try to figure out exactly what it is that we should be doing. I think there's so much benefit in both, but I see this wave and importance of coaching kind of starting to really take off and accelerate. So yeah, thank you
Yeah.
from a personal level for that articulation, because it's really resonated with me so much how you put that together.
Right. Yeah. And I think just to double down on the coaching within the product space, I do have to say that I think it's really, and this even came up in my 360 feedback, actually, to track back, that there are so many people out there who call themselves product coaches, which is why I don't call myself a product coach. I've been accredited as an executive coach, and that's me. But there's a lot of confusion because everybody these days seems to feel they are a coach, but hasn't had that training. And really,
Mm,
they are consultants. So it blurs a lot of lines, and it makes it really challenging from a communications perspective for the folks that are doing coaching to
yeah.
differentiate ourselves from people who are doing consulting but are known as coaches. So I would say just one thing before we wrap up. If you are looking for coaching, um, stop and think about what you want to get out of it. Are you looking
Mhm.
more for somebody to solve the problem for you? Are you looking for a mentor who's been there before and is going to help guide you in a more like specific way and more of a hand-holding way? Or are you looking for coaching, which is it's a different experience. It's going to be somebody helping you, to figure out for yourself what needs to change and how you can do that. So
There we go.
that's kind of that's my last statement on that.
I love that. But I'm going to transition from that to the final question I have for you, which is, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening, hopefully lots of people that are listening, who have taken so much from what you've been talking about, and I'm sure would want to find out more about you, more about the practices that you have. Where should people go? Where can people find out more about you and this kind of world that you occupy, if you like?
Yes. I have a website, aptly named kateleto.com. So you can find out about me and the new coaching program and all my other offerings there. I have a newsletter that goes out monthly. And I'm often talking about a new coaching technique that I've used with clients recently, or some aspect of emotional intelligence. So you can sign up for the newsletter and get that into your inbox every month. I'm on LinkedIn, of course. I'm on, do we call it Twitter? Do I call it, do I do this? I don't know exactly, but I'm on
It
that.
feels kind of wrong saying X, right? But yeah, you're there.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah. 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 I heard on the radio today, somebody said X, formerly known as Twitter. Anyway,
Right.
so we'll go with that. And then, and Mastodon as well. Um,
Cool.
and yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Amazing. We'll get those into the description as well down below, so there's easy access. I should say that the newsletter you can get to directly from the website as well. I've just checked that out myself, just to make
Yes.
sure that was, you can subscribe there. And I guess once you subscribe there, then information about the course around for the coaches, for kind of to yeah, the coaching course about coaching, I guess,
Yeah.
will be there as well. So
Yes.
everything will be down there. Amazing.
Yes.
Kate, this has flown by this time with you. Thank you so much. We've covered such a lot of ground. I've got more questions, but again, maybe there's another one at some point we could do. It'd be great to talk to you again. Thank you for the work that you've done and the time today, but particularly, the focus that you've had on hiring product managers, on really understanding what those important human skills are and what product EQ really kind of comes through. Even if you're not a product person, I think this is such a valuable book because you'll get so much from it in terms of general kind of human skills and capabilities that are so important across any organization right now and any function within the organization as well. So thank you for that, Kate. But thank you particularly for I feel like this is really indulgent of me to be able to talk to incredible people about product and all kinds of things for over an hour. It's been a real joy. What an amazing highlight for a Friday afternoon it's been for me. And I wish you, well, an amazing weekend and a successful launch of the course when that happens too.
Thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. And yeah, it has gone by. It's been great.
Awesome. Kate, thank you so much. I'll see you again next time.
Thank you.